Hi everyone, and welcome to this open session on the core model. I'll do an introduction to the model and the process and how it works. I've moved this session from Whereby to Zoom, so let's just hope everyone found their way. The slides will also be available at SlideShare at this address. So, the core model, or just a quick note about myself. My name is Are Hjertin Yrkjære Halland, no less. I'm a Norwegian. I've been in the business for 24 years, I think, about 20 years doing information architecture, user experience, design, content strategy, etc. And I worked 13 years for a digital agency called Netlife Design, formerly Netlife Research in Norway, where we developed this core model, which I invented in 2006, and it's been refined and tested in hundreds of projects ever since, and it seems to be working just better and better, actually. So this is the model. It's a quite simple sheet of paper with 7 fields. It's more or less just common sense put into a system, but it also have quite a deep, what can I say? It's a lot of meaning and depth in the different fields and some of the connections. I'll try to get back to that. So, but I guess for the content strategy, folks, most of you perhaps have read this article, or if you've heard about the core model, it's probably either through this article by Ira Aalen a few year back, with this case study about Kreftforeningen, the Norwegian Cancer Union. It's a great article, and I encourage you to read it if you haven't, for a great case study on using the core model. And since then, people around the industry have been using it. So Kristina Halvorsen is obviously a huge fan. And it's also been featured in this book by Megan Casey. Yes, she'll be talking right afterwards. So it's one of the methods included in the content strategy toolkit. And also, like I said, we've been trying it out for hundreds and hundreds of projects in Norway, all kinds of businesses and organizations, public, private consultancies, education institutions, all kinds of different organizations, and it seems to work just as good in every kind of context. And okay, so I've been working with this for 14 years, and I've also been pondering about 14 years about this book, and it's on its way, but it's in Norwegian, the first version. So it's called Core Model, a practical method to create better products and services. So I have a Twitter account where you can get updates on that. But actually, Jerry McGovern already wrote the preface, because he is one of the fans. So it says that it's about helping you discover and evolve strategy based on what is important to your customers, citizens, employees, in order to design better services, by first and foremost getting a crystal clear understanding of what it is your customers want to do. Jerry obviously is the father of the top task methodology, which was also a cornerstone in the core model. So, but how do I explain this? So it's quite simple, but it has a lot of different aspects. about it. So my favorite explanation is that it's a Kinder Surprise egg. I think this is actually illegal in the US, whereas guns are allowed. So I don't understand that. But anyway, a Kinder egg has many surprises in one, and the core model is, I'd like to say, it's a tool for cooperation, to getting alignment and getting people on board with the same kind of thinking. It's also a tool for prioritizing, finding out where to start and how to start in order to keep things simple and prioritized. And also, it's a hi, kids coming from school. It's also a tool for thinking. It kind of flips the perspective and makes things easier. And actually, just by flipping the perspective to think inside out instead of starting out with everything at once, we select one piece, one core to work with. And then there's also this perspective about solving user tasks. And this is the connection between user needs and business strategy, because if we solve the user task first, then we'll be able to a much larger extent to achieve our own goals as well. So, and the core sheet or the process is quite simple and analog. So I've taken pride never to use yellow stickers in these workshops. But then Corona came, and it's now a digital template also in a Mural, and it works just as well in a digital format. So the Mural template is coming up as an default template in Mural, and I'll also make my Miro version in time. So as you can see, it's a tool for thought. It's about getting things down and get alignment and discussions around content and functionality. But that's the core sheet. There's also a prioritization process, which I'll go a little more into next. But it's about prioritizing user tasks and our goals, and also as a tool for cooperation. It's a way to get clients, customers, the organization, to truly work multidisciplinary across silos and across organizational levels as well. Because this method allows us to see our services from a user perspective, and thus it facilitates communication and common understanding. So in a core workshop, we work in core pairs, which we and then the core pair is always from different silos. You have one person who knows the service and one who doesn't, and that's a core part of it to communicate across silos and competencies. So some benefits of this is obviously to get alignment in the organization on user needs and business goals, and how to prioritize between those, and through this process to reach a common understanding and to get anchoring for these priorities, and not using any buzzwords that are specific to one competency. It can work as a kind of Esperanto, because HR, IT, communication, marketing, everyone can relate to this model. And also, when it comes to content, you can talk about content strategy and content design for years and not reaching your audience, but having people actually work with it, work with real content that allows them to get a much better sense of why content is important, and that, okay, maybe we actually have to update this as well. And then we need to organize differently, and it kind of it allows for people to process the, what shall I say, to process how content really works, because how content is business strategy, really. So and to explain the core model, I like to use what I call the tale of a typical website. This is the story about more or less every content or website or internet redesign project I've done for the last 20 years. It's always the same story. And to put it, so this is the traditional approach. You have a huge, messy website. People are unhappy. Users can't find their way. Customer service is bogged down with banal questions, and nobody's happy. So, okay, let's get a redesign. And then most redesign projects start out by discussing content, buttons, colors, pictures, etc., on the front page. And then we start to discuss sketches, and everyone has an opinion on what should go there. So marketing wants to display all their messages, marketing messages, preferably at once. Communication wants to show their entire news article. Archive, fundraising, want to increase the size of the donate now button. IT have to have a prominent display of their security campaign, etc., and everyone weighs in, particularly senior management weighs in with layman opinions about color palette and the amount of air and the design grid and the size of the logo, but no one discusses the strategy or the content or what really matters. And sometimes this front page discussions end up with some kind of a foolish compromise with a carousel on top, where the organization's inability to prioritize really comes to the fore. And yeah, discussions tend to go on for the entire lifespan on the project around the front page. However, in parallel, someone, an information architect, usually creates a huge sitemap and a grand navigation design. A graphic designer produces template sketches for category pages, generic article templates, and fill it in with lorem ipsum and dummy text. Or perhaps it's just the CMS developer who sets up the entire structure and types content goes here or some other ramblings to fill out the article templates. And then, in my experience, around 2 weeks before launch, someone remembers that we need to have some content. We forgot to write it, and we don't have the resources. So people are summoned from everywhere in the organization to fill in these section templates and article templates, and they write whatever crosses their mind. Or else we just migrate all the crappy content and the press releases from the old site. And then, of course, we add lots of new pages because we have more content than we actually thought. And yeah, you know the process. This is how it goes typically. So content is filled in, and then we launch and leave, because now everything is published and now we can go to sleep. We have we're finished with doing the content. And you launch the new website. People are happy with the logo and the grid. Looks fine. The digital agency might win a prize for the great design, but in reality, what happens is, of course, your content, if it was not rotten at launch, it will rot even more over time. New added sections, campaign sites, duplicated content, what have you, etc., etc. The fact is that in all this mess, it's the poor user who have to figure out where is the content, where is the answer to my question. And the fact is, so this is the process, and then after 5 years, it's rinse and repeat. Same process over and over, and this happens in a cyclus of around 5 years, in my experience. So you redesign everything and fix nothing. But what is actually the case is that the actual user don't see any other pages usually than one page. So you're looking for an answer to a question, and the answer is somewhere in there. Usually, if we don't do our job, so usually Google can sort things out, but not even all the engineers in Silicon Valley can fix everything. So as long as the answer is not there, not even Google can get the user there. So that's a problem. On the internet, of course, it's even worse, because then we don't have Google to help us either. But the thing is, in reality, most users don't see any other pages on the website. They come, of course, from Google, from social media, from a newsletter, email, or maybe from the front page even. But the only thing they want from the front page is really to get where they want as soon as possible. So the sad situation then is that the entire website, the entire rest of the website, is just in the way for this particular user, because people get lost in navigation, that get lost in search. Yeah, this is a huge problem. But here comes the thing, because it doesn't have to be this way at all. It can be sorted out in a quite simple manner if we just start the other way around. Just focus the process and start with the core, which is usually a page or a process where you can solve one particular user task and at the same time reach a business goal. So if we start out with the core, it's also much easier to think about navigation and search optimization and marketing, and we can base it on the user's situation. And then if we solve the user task first, then we have a much better chance of reaching our own goals afterwards, if we have a relevant and prioritized calls to action, etc., etc. So that's the forward paths. So, but in order to achieve this, we need to start out by defining the cores. And this is, of course, a website example, but you could easily use the same thing for the same thinking for analog processes, for chats, for ePhone, for apps, for social media, content marketing, what have you, because the core, anyway, is the answer to the user's question, independent of the actual channel. So just a quick case from the municipality of Oslo. And this was my problem, actually, a few years ago. I've been doing some garden work and had lots of things to dispose of. And what do? My user need is to get rid of this as simple and effective as possible, whereas the goal for a municipality is usually to provide effective and efficient services to residents. And so there's a user task and a business goal that should align ideally. And what's this kind of the actual user task, what I need to do in order to get rid of this trash so that the municipality of Oslo can provide me effective services, is to find out what are the opening hours at Grønmo, which is the local recycling station. So that's my user task. And when this was a few years ago, but when I Googled, I got this #1 hit on Google, which is, this page is actually the openings hours for the autumn 2 years ago. So this is kind of the worst piece of content they could serve me possibly, but this is what happens if you have lots and lots of old outdated news articles lying around and don't have a prioritized system of content. So this is what happened, and this is what actually 3 years ago. So this was a huge problem for obviously for the municipality. So what they did is they looked at search logs and saw that opening hours was actually I think it was the #5 top task to find opening hours across all the services. So that was one core that they worked on, and they had this redesign project in 2015, and as you can see here, they measured the task completion. That's the number of people who actually managed to find the answer to the questions. And as you can see, it went up from 58% in 2013 to 71.5% in 2016. And that's a result of using the core model to prioritize. And when you do this prioritization, you don't really need a website at all. If you just pronounce the answer, if you identify the question and create the answer, then you can repurpose this. Google does this automatically as long as you code it the right way. But if you think about content as an answer to a question independent of channels, then you have the core content can be served in any channel. So the keyboard is just a parenthesis in the human history. So, but the answers, the questions and the answers remain. So the core content remains independent of the channel. So it doesn't have to be a web page then. So this is kind of an introduction to the thinking, but then there's also a process that we have defined that consists of 3 phases, whereas the first is about. So the center of this, of course, is the core workshop where people cooperate. But in order to make that, as you were mentioning, Hillary, to get the maximum effect of the workshop, you need to do some preparations. And that that's primarily has to do with get an overview of strategy and documenting user needs so that you have a shared understanding and the documentation of user needs. And based on that, you can prioritize the cores to work with and to get the right participants to be a part of the core workshop. And then, and as a rule of thumb, you should at least start a month in advance before you do a core workshop so that you can have everyone block out their time and their calendars, and then you also have time to get alignment on strategy and documenting user needs beforehand. And then in the workshop, this is a large group workshop format, so I've been doing this with 20 people, no problem, as long as they work in pairs, and you can have several facilitators, but have them work in pairs and make them work across silos and levels and competencies and work through this model to end up with the best answer to the problem. And then there's also what happens afterward. We need to fix this, of course. So using the momentum in the workshop to actually pin down the prioritized actions and delegate responsibility and fix things in the simplest possible way. So to just delve a little bit deeper into the prioritization preparation phase. So this is the basis is that users have tasks and we as an organization have goals, and somewhere usually these overlap, and this is how we find the cores. And as I mentioned, the top task methodology is an important part of this thinking, and identifying the top tasks. What are the most wanted tasks that people want to perform, and what are all the tiny tasks. Identify, if you look at the web statistics or the search log or the customer service logs, whatever, you will always find this same pattern. You have some top tasks that many people come to do, and some tiny tasks that hardly no one actually do. So in order to find your course, you have to take away the tiny tasks. This is not where we're starting. We have to make people understand that the tiny tasks is not the way to start. And then we have a lot of strategic goals, and quite many of them are lofty and not really that good. And at least they're not necessarily concerned about the digital channel that we're working on. So quite a lot of those goals can actually be deprioritized, and you have to find the goals, strategic goals, that are actually directly connected to overlapping with the user needs, where the users and the organization wants to do the same. That's where the core pages or the core processes are. This is a small screenshot from the Mural template. So in this case, we did a car insurance case, and we identified the target groups and the prioritized goals, measurable and concrete and prioritized. And we also identified the top tasks for the different target groups. And based on this, the core was quite obviously the car insurance product page. So this was one particular example of a pre-preparation process for a core workshop. So when we get to the core workshop, it's time to cooperate across silos and levels and competencies. And the way the workshop is structured is usually you give an introduction to documented user needs and the prioritized strategic goals, so that people understand that these are actually documented user needs, and there's alignment from management on the strategic priorities. And as you can see, obviously, this is a Norwegian core sheet, but the user needs should point down to the user tasks, and the strategy should point down to our goals. And then we run through the different fields in consecutive order. And those fields are the core name, which is really just a simple description of what we are trying to solve. Then we have the users. Participants need to have a clear view of who we are making this service for. So you can use personas or empathy mapping. Important part is that people get an empathy somehow with the user. And then we come to the user tasks, and the definition of a user task is, what is it the user comes to your solution to do? So obviously, when it comes to car insurance, it's comparing prices and terms, and buying, and also to report incidents. Those are typical user tasks for car insurance. Whereas if we have prioritized goals, it could be increasing sales, increasing self-service, or increasing customer satisfaction. Those are three typical goals that are always those are the typical ones. So what we need is a way to express what it is that we want as an organization to get out of this. And based on this, we come to the inward paths, which is where is the user before he or she gets to the core. So this is obviously you Google car insurance, you Google opening hours. So search engine optimization is an important part of this. So ask yourself, what would I search on Google? But if you also look into the context, the scenario for the user, then you will also see other kind of inward paths. So if you sit at home in your coach, comparing different car insurance companies, then you will probably go through insurance brokers in any way. Or if you just bought a car and out the car dealer, then you'll probably use a mobile device. So you can kind of get a clear view of how users will think about getting to your solution. And then you can also think strategical as to what other websites or partners that could link to this page. And obviously also what other pages on your own website should point there. The front page, the main purpose of the front page, in my view, is to get people as fast as possible to where they really want to be, usually the core. And one interesting question to ask is, what would you do yourself? So those are the inward paths. So that's about creating traffic to your solution. But in order to have success online, you also need conversion. You need to convert your visitors into customers, or whatever kind of conversion you're interested in. So when the inward parts are about traffic, forward parts mainly concerning conversion. So and conversion is what we want to happen after the user has interacted with the core. And then we have to look at our goals. What are the most relevant goals for the current task that we're looking at? And obviously you want to buy car insurance. That's an important call to action. But if we look at the goals, then it's increased sales. So it's not just car insurance. Maybe we could bundle different insurance products, and so people can have a rebate. So this is a way of thinking about micro strategy from the angle of the content, to see how we can actually reach other goals as well. So, but when we kind of empathize with the user, we can also think, what kind of mode is the user in after he or she has completed the task? And a typical thing with the buying process is that people don't buy. They compare. They're in a buying process, so they are comparing with others, and our goal should be that they they get the information, they solve their task at our website, which is to find out the terms and conditions and prices, and then we want them to come back later. So it's not a direct conversion, but there are also kind of other implications for how this customer journey should continue. And obviously, looking at our own website and our partners, are there any channels that this content could lead to? And it's also important to find out what is prioritized, what is the most important call to action of this. So this is about prioritizing what it is we want the user to do. It's about behavioral psychology, if you will, and it's about sales, and it's about conversion. But when we get this far in the core workshop, we have a great framework, because we know what the user comes to do. We know what we want to happen. What we haven't said anything about is what is the solution. How will we fulfill the user's need and at the same time reach our business goals? We haven't said anything about content or functionality or channel. What we're after now is to think freely about what is the optimal way of solving the user task and achieve our own goals. And then it comes down to what is the content that actually answers the user's question, and is there any functionality that we need, design, infographics, calculators, whatever. Then that is also a part of the content, so we need to consider those in relation. And we should also ask the question, which channel is the best one for actually conveying this message? It might not be that. It might be that the web page is not the right place to do it, or that there are other channels that can support this. So, and when we get to this point, participants fill out the hole in the middle, and it's not important how they do it. The important thing is the process and the principles that they come up with, that they have these discussions, and that they agree on the basics. So you can draw, you can write, you can have a flow diagram, you can do whatever. Just get the discussion going and agree on the principles. And this could be, of course, be done digital as well. So what we're after is the content principles that people can agree on. Typically, we want to have as little text as possible. We need to show our unique selling points. We have to have a prioritized call to action. And if we start to discuss the actual content of the unique selling points, then we need to actually discuss content. What are the 3 things that we want to communicate here? And functionality, could we perhaps enter the license plate number and the zip code to get an automatic quote? You can also have all these kind of great ideas about functionality and content. And then you also always run into some organizational problems. So we need to show the price and the coverage. We don't want to show the price because we're so expensive. Then that's an organizational problem that we also need to address in the long term. And then there's a part of the workshop which is about prioritizing, and this is where the content, the workshop participants actually need to get their hands dirty and write real content and prioritize it so that it fits on a mobile screen. So in this case, they had to write the actual wording of the unique selling points, and I had to prioritize the button and some functionality about how the prices and the coverage should be conveyed. So this is a typical example of this exercise. And what happens what happens afterwards is that we have great discussions in pairs, and we do sharing. And then afterwards, all the core pairs get to present their own solution, and we have great discussions where we can. And this is the momentum. This is where you can, as a facilitator, jump in with an action card, which is what needs to happen for this to actually become a reality in the real world. What needs to be done? How should it happen? Who will do it? And when will it happen? And this is where we catch the low-hanging fruit, just the simple changes, but also being able to address the more difficult processes and tear them down into next actions, and keeping a backlog and keeping people responsible for that. So that's the last part of this, is actually fixing things and have things happen in the real world, as I like to think about it. So typical follow-up activities is usually we see that we can delete some content, or we can change some content. Pair writing is a great method for working together on content or other kinds of content development. This core sheet is actually a quite good design brief for a design process. And it's also a start for making organizational changes when people understand the problems. So that's the core sheet. It's about combining different perspectives. It's about having a user focus. It's having a strategic perspective. Inward paths are about marketing and information architecture, whereas forward paths are about sales and behavior. And the core content is about design and content to solve all of these. So this is a map for the participants to understand, to get actually what you call digital maturity, because you understand these principles, working through this in concrete, and breaking it down to concrete steps. And all in all, this is a simplification of all of these processes, and it's a concrete manifestation of how you should solve it in one particular instance. So it helps you prioritize both where to start, the core and the core content, how that should be prioritized, and the inward paths and the forward paths together is just a small part of a customer journey. So this fits well into a customer journey kind of mapping thing, and that kind of thinking. And it's also about making progress, making things happen in the real world. So important to catch the actions and delegate that. So that's basically what I wanted to say. You can find articles, templates, and updates at thecoremodel.com. This is the workshop template that we used. Here's the included example with car insurance, and in the middle is where you can fill out your own core content, and there's also some links to more material here. So if you go to this address, you can just select duplicate mural and use that as a template for your own. There's also a mini template for doing simple light versions of the core workshop and doing pair writing in a Google document. You can find this here. So that was what I wanted to say, or what I managed to say. Do you have any questions or comments?